So hey, what's up guys? How's everyone doing? In this video, I'm gonna be doing like a small tutorial on how to make a slideshow using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This was inspired by an example I saw on w3schools.com, which is a website with a lot of tutorials, all kind of programming tutorials. In case you don't know it, maybe check it out. And yeah, let's get going. So first of all, I have an index.html file here, and my browser open on the right, and every line of code I write is gonna be immediately previewed on the right here, thanks to a plugin that I'm using that's called Live Server in VS Code. I guess most of you know it. If not, check it out. It's a handy plugin. It allows you to immediately see the result of what you're typing without refreshing the page every time. So okay, let's get started. I'm gonna be doing !enter to get boilerplate code. Here the doc type HTML head, metadata, and body. This is !enter in VS Code. And let's start making our slideshow. So I want the slideshow to basically consist of a div that contains a header and then the images, and then a small marker section that will show me which slide I'm on. It's going to be basically a bunch of dots where every dot lights up when, for example, the first dot will light up when the first slide is showing, then the second dot will light up when the second slide is showing, and so on. So first of all, I'm going to be doing the container of the slideshow. It's going to be a div, and I'm going to give it a class of slideshow. This is Emmet syntax. Div.slideshow will create a div element with a class of slideshow. I'm gonna immediately start giving it some styles. So I'll do style, and I'm gonna be doing internal styles. Again, this is not the best practice. Usually you wanna make a separate CSS file with all the styles, but for the sake of this tutorial, I wanna keep everything in one page so we can see it all at the same time. And I wanna target the slideshow div, and I want to give it a border of 2 pixel solid black. This will be only so I can see what I'm working with here, and since it's empty, I also want to give it like a width of, for example, 800 pixels. Let's fill the slideshow div with like a header, for example, header here. The slideshow that I intend on making in this tutorial is going to be like some of my favorite games. So I'll do like something like my favorite PlayStation 1 games. Okay, so I had to refresh manually the first time, and then from now on, hopefully it will refresh automatically. Okay, so this is gonna be our slideshow, and after the header here, I wanna have another section that contains the actual slides. So I'm gonna be making a div and give it a class of slide container. So I'll be placing here an image element, and I'll immediately be linking the first image that I'm gonna be using here in this project. For example, I have a folder that contains a bunch of images that I downloaded before starting the tutorial, and I placed them in this folder, and I'm gonna be using them for the slideshow. Anyway, let's get going. Images, Metal Gear Solid. Okay, so now we have the image right under the header, but it's obviously too big. So let's immediately target the image, and I'll do that by targeting the slide container, and then targeting the image element that is inside the slide container. And let's give it a width. Maximum width should be 100%. Like, this means that the image should never exceed the size of the container of the image. And the container of the image at the moment is taking the same size as its parent. So the container of the image is also 800 pixels. And now, as you can see, the picture is contained inside the 800 pixels. I'm also going to be giving it a height. Like, I don't want the slideshow to ever be above, for example, I don't know, 500 pixels. Like, the height should never exceed 500 pixels. As you can see, this works, but it's starting to crop the image. Like, the size of the image is not maintaining the original ratio, so it's kind of distorted a little bit. So we can fix that by giving the image a property of object, fit, and then cover. This will make it so that the image covers the div in which it is contained without distorting the image. This will result in maybe some parts of the image not showing, but at least it will make sure that the image is not distorted. I'll be using this. It's obviously not perfect, but it's still better than having the image distorted, at least in my opinion. And okay, let's get going. I'll be placing immediately all the other images as well. So I'll be copying the image element and placing all the other images one on top of the other. I have another image for Crash Bandicoot, and then another image for Resident Evil, and then Silent Hill. And since they're all images and they're all contained in my slide container, they all get this rule: the width 100%, height 500 pixels, and object fit color. Okay, so under the images, I want to have like a little marker that shows which slide I'm on. At the moment, it's just going to be like 4 dots, 1 dot for every image. Eventually, we're going to animate the marker depending on what image is showing. Below the slide container and still inside the slideshow, I want to make a div. I'm going to give it a class of dots container, for example. The marker is going to be in the shape of dots, and I'm going to be making like 4 dots, 1 for every image, by making 4 divs. Give every div a class of dot times 4. So now I have 4 divs here. They're still empty, so they're not showing, but I'm immediately going to target them with some CSS to give them an appearance. So I'll go target the dot class and give them like a border of 2 pixel black as well, and a width and a height of, I don't know, 10 pixels, for example. So now I have these 4 squares right here. I want them to be aligned horizontally. So I'm gonna target the dots container and give it a class of flex. A display property of flex. So dot container display flex. This is gonna align the 4 divs here horizontally. I'm also gonna justify the content in the center. I'm also gonna be giving every dot a border radius of 50%, so that they become circles instead of squares. And I'm gonna be putting a little bit of margin between every dot. So margin right, for example, 0.5 rem. That's a little bit too much, so we'll do like 0.25. Okay, this kind of works. Maybe they're a little bit too big, so I'll go for a 5 pixel on each. Too small, so 8. Okay, so basically that's it for the dots. I'm not gonna spend too much styling them. Okay, so now we want only one slide to show at a time, and then eventually we want like the next slide to show when we, for example, when we click on the next dot, and the third slide to show when we click on the fourth dot, and the fourth slide, and so on. So I'll start by making all the slides hidden at the beginning. The images inside the slide container should all have a display of none at the beginning. And then I want to programmatically give them a display of a block by using some JavaScript. So I'll start making a small script section here at the end of the document. Again, this is not good practice to have like the script inside the HTML, but I'm gonna be doing it for the sake of this tutorial to have everything in one page. Okay, so first of all, we wanna have a reference to all the slides in this carousel or slideshow. So I'm gonna be doing this by declaring a constant and calling it slide array. And this slide array will be equal to document.query selector all, and select all the images that are inside the slide container. And this is done by using the selector of slide container, and then target the images that are inside. And then I want to make a function that will take a number and show a slide that corresponds to that number. For example, show slide number. So you call this function by giving it a number, and it will change the display property of the slide that corresponds to this number to block, and change the display of all the other slides to none. So slide array, and then slide number dot style dot set property. This sets a property in the CSS of the slides that corresponds to this slide number, and set property is going to be, for example, display and have it be a block. So now if I call this function and give it, for example, a slide number of 0, now it's supposed to go and target the first slide over here, or the first image, and give it a display of block. So let's see if it works. Show slide 0. So nope, we have a little problem, so I'm gonna go quickly debug here. Cannot access slide array before initialization. So okay, I shouldn't have called the function before initializing the slide array. Since the slide array is called inside the function, it already needs to be declared. Okay, so if I give it a show slide of 0, it's going to show the first slide. Show slide of 1 shows the second slide, of 3, 4th slide, 2, 3rd slide, etc. Okay, so let's go back to show slide 0. Now another thing I want to do is have like these little buttons that are at the bottom of the slide light up depending on what slide is showing. So if I'm showing the first slide with Metal Gear Solid, I want the first button to show. If I'm showing the second slide, I want the second button to show, and so on. So let's get a reference to these dots so that I can control them in some way. So constant dots array equals document.query selector, again, same thing, query selector all. And what am I gonna select? I'm gonna select all the divs that have a class of dot. This will end up giving me a reference to these 4 dots in this variable. Why is that? Because they all have like a class of dot. In this case, there's a difference though, and that is that I don't want to be hiding the other dots. I just want the dot that corresponds to this slide to change its appearance. So I'm gonna do that. There's several ways to do that, obviously, but the way I'm gonna be doing it is making a class that changes the appearance of this dot, and have that class applied to the dot that corresponds to the image that is showing. I don't know if this is kind of confusing, but it will get clearer as we do it. So I'll make a class that is called, for example, selected dot. And this class changes the background color of whatever div it is applied to. So for example, it will change the background color to black. And now let's just do it manually to show what I mean here exactly. When I apply the selected dot class to any one of our dot divs over here, this is how it changes. Now I want this to be done programmatically via JavaScript. I don't want to be doing it manually. So we will go for the dots array that we declared, and also give it the same number of the slide number. And this time we will go for the property of class list and do add, and we add the selected dot class. So if I call the show slide with 0, it's going to highlight the first dot and show the first slide. If I call it with 1, it should highlight the second dot. With 3, I don't know why I keep skipping 2, but yeah, that's the idea. Let's go back to 0. Now another thing I want to do is have these dots be responsive to my clicks. So if I click on the first dot, I want it to show the first slide. If I click on the second dot, I want it to show the second slide, and so on. So how do I do this? I will put an onClick function or onClick event listener on every div or on every dot, and make it so that it calls a function of show slide with the according number. So on the first slide is going to be show slide 0. And on the second slide is going to be show slide 1. Third slide is going to be show slide 2, etc. So now if I click here, yeah, so we have a problem. Of course, I forgot that I also have to hide the other slides. Like I only want one slide to be showing. So at the moment, the problem is that it won't hide the previously shown slide. So before showing the slide, we want to loop over every slide and every dot and hide all of them, and then only show the one that I selected in the slide number. So for let I equals 0, I is smaller than slide array dot length, which means loop over from 0 to whatever length the slide array has minus 1. I plus plus, this will increase the I as we go along in our loop. Like these same two properties, same two lines of code, this time with a number of I. So slide array dot style dot set property display to none, and dots array number I dot class list dot remove, this time the selected dot. So this part of the code will make sure that every time I'm calling the show slide, we will loop over every slide and give it a display of none. We will loop over every dot and remove the class list of select dot, and then we will target the slide array slide number that I'm passing here with a display of block, and the dot array, I'm also gonna go to the slide number and give it a class list, or add to the classes it has the class selected dot. So okay, so let's test it. Now if I click here, it should only display the, okay, so it's working properly now. Okay, so another thing I want to do is, beside having me be able to click on the dot that corresponds to the slide, I also want the slides to keep switching from one to the next, to the next, to the next on their own. Like every, for example, 3 seconds, I want the slides to switch to the next slides automatically, so that people can keep seeing the slideshow even without clicking. So how do we do that? We will make a function that displays the next slide every, I don't know, let's say 3 seconds. So let's start by doing like a set interval. And this interval will call a function that's called show next slide. This function I still haven't defined, but I'm gonna do it now. And have this set interval trigger every 3 seconds or 3000 milliseconds. So basically, in case you don't know what this is a JavaScript built-in function that will call this function here every 3000 seconds. Set interval, which means at intervals of 3000 milliseconds. At intervals of 3000 milliseconds, call the show next slide function. So in order for the next slide function to work, we need to have some sort of reference to what is the current slide, so that we declare a variable that is defined globally here, that I'm gonna call like let current slide equals 0. It will start by being 0, for example. And every time we update the slide to something different, I want the current slide here to have a different number inside it. So for example, when we're showing like the third slide like this, I want current slide here to be number 2. And when we're showing the first slide, I want current slide to be number 0. When we're showing the second slide, I want it to be number 1. It's always like the number of the slide minus 1, basically. Why? Because in programming, we usually start counting from 0. It's just, I don't know, a convention, you could call it. Anyway, we have like the current slide here, and when we show slide, I wanna, before leaving the function, I want to make it so that the current slide variable is assigned the slide number that we are currently on. So now we should always have the number of the slide that we are currently on inside this variable over here. So this will make it much easier to build the function that I wanted to build for show next slide. This will simply take the current slide, increase it by 1, and then call show slide again with the increased number. So let's start writing this function. So function show next slide is gonna take the current slide, increase it by 1. This double plus signs means increase by 1. So increase current slide by 1, and call show slide with the new current slide number. But we only have a problem now, is that if we already reached the end of the slides, for example, if we have only 3 slides and we are, or 4 slides, and we are on number 3, then we don't want to call number 4 because there is no number 4 slide. We want to go back to number 0. So I have to make a quick check here. If current slide, sorry, I should have done it before increasing the slide number. So if current slide is smaller than slide array length -1, so as long as there's still more slides that we can actually increase the current slide number to, then we want to do like a current slide ++ and then show the next slide. If we already hit the array length -1, which means we are on the last slide. So if there's no more slides in the array, I want to go back to the beginning. So I'll do a show slide of 0. So this means show the next slide as long as there's more slides. If we reach the end of the array, then show me the first slide now. So at the moment it's not working, which means we have an error. So let's go debug and see what's the problem. Okay, so I had a mistake here, and that mistake is that I made an if statement that checks if we reach the end of the array of the slides array, and then I put like a show slide 0 no matter what. This should have been in an else block. Like we don't always want to show the first slide, otherwise this function, every time it's called, it will show the first slide. So I wanted to either show the next slide as long as there is a next slide, and if we reach the end of the array, then go back to showing the first slide. Okay, so this is how it's supposed to work. So as you can see now, I can click on the dots here to show whatever slide I want to show, and meanwhile the carousel or the slideshow will also keep going on its own. So this is basically the core of the slideshow. I'm gonna apply some quick styling to it, just to be a little bit more completionist than this, so that it looks slightly better. The dots container would benefit from having some space around it, because as you can see, it's all crammed up. So for example, do like a margin, and the dots container could have a margin top of 1 rem and the margin bottom of 1 rem. And then we could also like give the whole carousel, we could make it look a little bit better. For example, instead of having a border with 2 pixels solid black, we could do a box shadow with, for example, no vertical offset. This is vertical offset, horizontal offset of like 10 pixels. Yeah, we can change the color of the shadow to be something more on the grayish side. It usually looks better, yeah, with less blur. And we can also give it, for example, rounded corners, like border radius of like, I don't know, 25 pixels. Or give the slide container a little bit of padding on the left and on the right of 1 rem on each side. Now since it's overflowing, we can give the whole HTML document a box sizing of border box. This will make it so that the padding, the borders are also counted in the size of the element. So this effectively will make it so that giving padding to an element won't make it overflow like we had before. And I don't know, give the My Favorite PS1 Games text over here a little bit of margin as well. So I'll target the only H2. I'm not even gonna give it a class, a margin of 1 rem as well. And yeah, basically, I mean, I could also remove the border on the whole slideshow now. Or did it look better before? I don't know. Maybe it looked better with the border. Just don't make it black, make it something a little bit more transparent, like this. Yeah, I guess this works, kinda. You know, you get the idea, basically. Like, we could spend a lot of time just styling and perfectioning how the slideshow works, but at the end of the day, this is the core functionality of it. You know, you can switch slides by clicking here, or you can just wait for it and it will keep going on its own. So yeah, that was basically it. I hope you guys maybe enjoyed the tutorial, maybe learned something from it. And this is all for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.